I keep seeing the same signal. Mexico's rising leverage isn't a headline, it's a threshold. Once supply chains reroute, once energy sovereignty hardens contracts, once labor movements and Chinese investment lock in capital and talent, the balance of power in North America doesn't snap back. It reconfigures. The story isn't only cross-border trade or migration. It's the operating system of a region updating itself. Compute capacity near factories, grid reliability near data, capital formation near skills, standards propagating faster than laws can catch them. The fault lines are generic and predictable. Power concentrates where throughput is highest. Legitimacy thins when institutions lag the tools people actually use. Capacity fails quietly at first, permits, ports, grids, housing, then all at once. Innovation outruns adoption until the bottlenecks start dictating terms. There's a compact rhyme from another era, when railroads and telegraph lines synchronized markets, cities that aligned early compounded advantage, while others learned that distance is a cost function, not a map. The stakes are human and strategic. Households carry price spikes. Founders face real friction. Border communities absorb surges. Policymakers inherit the latency. Apparent strength can hide fragility when systems scale unevenly. At this level of strain, change is unavoidable. Only the direction is open. The path is a choice between constructive reinvention and deeper fracture. Next, I'll lay out the mechanisms, the near and long-term timelines, and how the costs and benefits distribute across the region. September 27th, 2025. Today's deployment architecture stress test was simple. Can we keep eval coverage honest while hitting a 150-250 ms P95 target at a unit cost that survives peak tariffs on cross-border inputs, with power guarantees that don't wobble in heat waves? One concrete anchor. In 2023, Mexico became the United States' top goods trading partner, confirmed in the U.S. Census Bureau's annual goods table, Table 1. I treat that single table as a practical design spec. Proximity just turned into architecture. The capability cost frontier bends toward nearshore latency, regional energy, and bilingual distributions. It formed through years of supply rerouting, and the realistic options now fit on one page. Optimize for North American locality, or get squeezed by distance, fees, and power uncertainty. The basic argument is that Mexico's rising leverage is already changing how we ship AI. We will collocate more inference and some training on the North American spine that runs from Texas through the Bajío to the border metros, and we will harden our governance to match cross-border labor, data, and energy constraints. Here is why the unit economics of serving intelligence at scale favors shorter hops and predictable watts. And the distribution flywheel favors products that fit local languages, labor rules, and uptime realities. I picked the platform shift through line because it is where the rubber meets distribution. Every time the stack shifted, from PCs to web to mobile, the winners were the builders who matched capability to reach. Agents are another shift, but they aren't magic. They are latency-sensitive orchestration across models, tools, and records. The more the North American supply chain densifies around Mexico, the more local-first agents beat global round trips, not on hype, but on millis and dollars. Mechanism 1 is compute and energy supply. Everyone can talk about accelerators. Fewer people price the energy envelope honestly. Grid interties across the border, gas pipeline capacity, and regional renewables determine whether we can commit to targeted service level objectives when the weather is indifferent to launch schedules. Mechanism 2 is distribution and productization, onboarding, retention, dev ecosystem, and trust. In the nearshore pattern, those are bilingual, cross-compliant, and priced to the purchasing power of both sides of the border, not just Silicon Valley benchmarks. I tested the claim against 3 public artifacts. First, the U.S. Census Bureau's trade rankings, Table 1, establish proximity as a dominant fact, not a mood. Second, the USMCA's entry into force notice on July 1st, 2020 is an official text that locks in rules of origin and dispute paths. It sets the rails for what local means in compliance terms. The definitions live in the agreement's text and annexes. Third, the 2022 semiconductor industrial policy in the U.S. is a matter of public law. It changed capital flows for fabs, packaging, and upstream parts. Together, those documents tell me that training clusters, inference caches, and data pipelines will be pulled toward where components, power, and regulatory clarity actually are. What does that mean in product terms? Vignette 1. A manufacturing co-pilot for a Tier 2 auto supplier in the Bajío that runs inspection, maintenance scheduling, and vendor chat in Spanish and English tied to local MES data. The value is downtime avoided and scrap reduced. The failure mode is hallucinated parts and weekend outages during heat advisories. We met the bar by pinning a compact vision model on local GPUs and caching instructions at the edge. We failed when we tried to save pennies by routing every frame to a distant cluster. Vignette 2. a cross-border customer support agent for a consumer electronics brand that fields claims in Tijuana and Phoenix with PCI-safe tool use. The win was first call resolution and human-in-the-loop escalation that respected both countries' data retention rules. The risk was silent degradation when a rate limit tripped during a flash sale. We fixed it by enforcing back pressure and visible fallbacks, not by cutting corners. Vignette 3. A supply planning planner for a mid-market textile business that uses customs calendars and port ETAs to schedule shifts. It earned trust only when our predictions came with confidence intervals and explicit provenance to Table 1 style trade stats rather than vibes. Human impact shows up in small places. A line manager in Monterey doesn't care about our model family tree. She cares that the inspection camera catches the chipped housing at 5 p.m. on Friday, that the bilingual note reads like a person, and that her team's overtime isn't burned because our inference endpoint slowed to molasses. A teacher in El Paso using a Spanish-first reading assistant needs the tool to work on flaky school Wi-Fi and to respect local content norms. Reliability is dignity at this scale. I keep my safety posture boring and layered. Red team before release, post-deploy monitoring, and an incident drill that includes rate limit storms and data locality failures. When we say enforcement, we mean tools that actually trip, guardrails that block dangerous tool calls, age gates that hold under pressure, and audit logs that an external reviewer can follow. Governance is not a press release. It's a runbook with names and pagers. There are options. There are 4 on paper. 2 are off the table because they fail basic constraints. Global round-trip everything to the cheapest region dies on latency and user trust. Spray agents with no evals dies on safety drift and incident cost. The decision is between regionalize inference with tight caching and bilingual UX, and go further to partial training or fine-tuning in region to chase data sovereignty and uptime. We can do either. The deciding variables are energy contracts, data residency promises, and developer support capacity. Execution dominance means winning each iteration as constraints tighten, hitting the next eval bar while shaving cost and reducing incident probability, not just landing a flashy demo. A contrarian check helps here. The mainstream line is that nearshoring is a cost story. The quieter truth is that it's a governance and energy story with cost as the shadow. Test. Read the USMCA's data and services language and compare it to your own data handling practices. If your policy can't be mapped to a paragraph and an audit trail, your local story is brittle. The implication is we build for auditability first, cleverness second. 2 pragmatic recommendations follow. For cloud and infra partners, instrument a north-south power hedge now. Secure long-duration power purchase agreements with transparent emissions disclosures. And collocate inference caches along pipeline rights-of-way where cooling water and transmission exist. Horizon, the next 2 quarters. For product and developer relations, ship a bilingual agent SDK with opinionated safety defaults and templates for USMCA-compliant data handling and staff support in Mexico City and the border metros. Horizon. This quarter for beta, next quarter for GA. We keep the numbers straight. Latency, P95 under 250 milliamperes for retrieval augmented answers with 2 tool calls on congested links tested at the edge. Unit cost, under the floor, where a human agent hour in a call center breaks even, inclusive of monitoring and reruns. Reliability, SLOs stated in plain language, what we guarantee, what we don't. Evaluations, capability evals that include bilingual prompts and domain data, plus abuse and misinterpretation checks fit to the local context. Safety mitigations, capped tool rights, rate limits, and live-off switches for sensitive flows. Post-deploy, we watch drift on both sides of the border, not just in our home time zone. The question is not whether Mexico changes the map. It already has. The question is whether we design to the map or fight it. I choose to design to it. That means locality for speed and trust, energy as a first-class input, governance that survives external review, and distribution that respects how people actually work and live in border economies. If that sounds unglamorous, good. Shipping is unglamorous when it's done right. Bottom line, proximity is now architecture. The table that ranked Mexico number 1 is not a headline. It is the bill of materials for where we put racks, caches, and support desks. We will keep the cadence, ship, measure, adjust, repeat, with guardrails that hold and costs that make sense at scale. Next, I map concrete latency and unit cost levers for bilingual agents, then stress the safety stack against real cross-border failure modes. The risk is safety drift hidden inside good enough averages, masks of reliability that crack under heat, wage stoppages, or customs delays that push traffic into poorly tested fallback paths. I'll use the safety practice through line today. how we moved from unit tests to live red teaming and post-deploy monitoring, and why Mexico's leverage forces us to treat those as first-class product features, not compliance afterthoughts. The basic argument is that our competitive edge is not raw capability, it's disciplined iteration under constraint. Here is why. Models will continue to improve for everyone, but builders who can keep latency, cost, and safety stable through cross-border shocks will compound trust faster than anyone chasing a single benchmark crown. Mechanism 1 is latency and unit economics. Latency is the time from a user's request to a useful answer. Unit cost is the all-in marginal expense per request, including tokens, tools, caches, guardrails, and reruns. We control both with 3 levers: retrieval locality, tool call budgeting, and cache hit rate. Mechanism 2 is safety mitigations and governance. That means input, output filtering, rate limits tied to risk tiers, enforceable data locality promises, and audit logs that let an outside reviewer trace a decision to a specific model, prompt, and guardrail at a specific time. I anchor 3 facts to documents, not opinion. First, electricity price volatility correlates with summer peak load in north-south corridors. Monthly generation and price tables show spikes that matter for GPU economics, named in the regulator's monthly electric power data, Table 7. Second, cross-border freight transit times vary systematically with inspection regimes. A customs agency performance brief lists median wait times by port and hour. Performance report, Section 3. Third, wage floors in certain industrial corridors shifted after collective bargaining changes. A labor survey's wage index by region, Table B, shows the new baseline. These facts matter because they hit our SLOs through power cost, demand spikes, and hiring plans for bilingual support. Vignette 1 is a bilingual field service agent for HVAC maintenance spanning Laredo and Nuevo Laredo. The agent schedules crews, generates safety checklists in Spanish or English, and pulls part numbers from photos. Our P95 was 210 memes on weekday mornings with a 78% cache hit rate. It failed on Saturday heat waves when requests doubled, and our image tool calls overwhelmed a single downstream service. The fix wasn't a bigger model, it was a local retrieval tier and a budget-aware planner that refused to chain tools more than twice without escalating to a human dispatcher. The safety win came from pre-validating checklists against a static catalog, no free-form creative steps near live equipment. Vignette 2 is a compliance assistant for mid-market manufacturers navigating rules of origin and vendor attestations. The naive build hallucinated clause numbers under load. We replaced that with retrieval over a curated document store of agreements and official guidance, with every citation linked to paragraph or annex identifiers. We measured grounding in a bilingual eval set and required that every answer render both the ruling and the page reference. Cost dropped because we didn't need retries to fix wrong claims. Latency dropped because we cached the most hit passages near the requesters. Safety improved because we refused to answer outside the index and surfaced I don't know cleanly. Vignette 3 is a logistics planner for freight forwarders that predicts border crossing ETAs and chooses ports. We integrated a customs wait time feed and port status bulletins, both referenced to Section 3 types of artifacts. The hard part wasn't prediction, it was user trust when the system advised rerouting to a less familiar port. We won trust by showing the inputs, the confidence interval, and the last 5 similar decisions with outcomes. We lost trust when a rate limit in our upstream mapping API returned stale road closures. The safety mitigation was a watchtower check that fails closed and asks the human to confirm when upstream freshness drops. The human impact passage is simple. When a line worker in Saltillo asks the co-pilot where to send a defective housing, she needs an answer in her language, with a label that prints and a truck that actually arrives. If our system says hold the part until Monday and the grid wobbles or a bridge clogs, she eats the overtime. Reliability is not abstract. It's the difference between a paycheck that stretches and one that doesn't. I designed the safety stack in layers. Input filters screen for abusive or hazardous prompts. Capability evals include bilingual instructions and domain data, so we don't kid ourselves with English-only coverage. Tool call policies define what an agent may do on certain flows. Charging a card, writing an attestation, scheduling a crew, and they are auditable rules, not comments. A watchdog process samples live traffic, replays it on held-out models, and flags shifts. We drill incidents monthly, rate limit storms, data locality failures, and misgrounded citations. None of this is glamorous. All of it is why we sleep at night. There are options. 1. Centralize inference in the cheapest zone and pray the network holds. 2. Overshard across every border city and wear the cost of idle capacity. Both fail. The decision is between a regional mesh with adaptive caches and a hybrid where we collocate tool-heavy paths, vision, forms, signatures, and keep light chat centralized, judged by safety, capability, cost, and time to learn. The hybrid wins now because it gives us knobs. We can move a heavy path closer during heat season, then retract when the grid cools. A contrarian line, the bottleneck is not model size, but bilingual retrieval discipline. Test it. Run a grounded Q&A eval where every answer must include a clause reference, paragraph 12 or Annex A, in both languages, and compute exact match plus citation match. The document is the scorekeeper. When we did this, smaller models with ruthless retrieval beat larger ones that wandered. The implication is clear. Invest in corpus quality, index design, and caching before chasing the biggest weights. 2 recommendations for infra and finance teams. Buy power certainty, not just power. Structure a seasonal power hedge tied to peak hour buckets, and collocate inference near water-cooled facilities with transparent emissions accounting. Horizon, contracts in 60 days, first migrations in 120. For product and safety leads, publish a bilingual reliability pact that states SLOs, failure modes, and grievance paths. Back it with an on-call rotation in Mexico City and the border metros. Horizon, draft in 30 days, live in 90 with audits. We stay empirical. Our cost per augmented answer is the sum of base tokens, retrieval calls, tool tokens, guardrail runs, and reruns. We log each separately. We target a P95 under 250 menace with 2 tool calls on congested links and a P99 under 500 ms. We collect drift deltas by domain and language. We sample live traffic and reevaluate it weekly with fixed seeds and a fixed corpus to see whether we are improving or just moving the deck chairs. We tie promotions to reliability and safety deltas, not demo applause. Chinese capital flowing into Mexican industrial parks. Labor movements, bargaining for better wages, and energy projects shifting baseload supply are not headlines to admire. They are parameters in our deployment plan. When a wage floor rises, we budget for local support hires and expand self-serve tools. When a new intertie or pipeline comes online, we revisit co-location and cooling. When inspections tighten, we modify ETAs and push trust evidence higher in the UI. This is execution dominance, winning each iteration as constraints tighten. Bottom line, we turn proximity into reliability, and reliability into trust, and trust into scale. We do it by measuring the right things, grounding answers in documents with named paragraphs and tables, and refusing to hide behind averages. The pressure stays on because Mexico's leverage will keep rising and the shocks will keep coming. We don't outrun them, we design for them. Next, I examine compute siting, energy contracts, and interconnection risks, then map Chinese capital and labor shifts to infra and hiring choices. The danger is quiet, interconnection queues stretch, summer peaks bite, and the cheapest megawatt on paper becomes the most expensive outage at 4 p.m. I'll use the energy and infrastructure throughline because it explains real-world throughput better than any model chart. The basic argument is that siting wins or loses the deployment before a single prompt is served. Here's why. Compute without predictable, clean power is a stranded asset, and regional locality collapses if cooling water, transmission headroom, or interties fail when demand spikes. Our advantage is not novel silicon. It is disciplined site selection plus energy certainty tied to product reliability. Mechanism 1 is compute supply and energy contracts. Accelerators are necessary but not sufficient. The binding constraint is guaranteed watts delivered at stable voltage and temperature with known curtailment rules. I anchor 3 checkable facts. First, interconnection queues are historically long. The latest quarterly queues report lists median timelines measured in years with a heavy tail. Executive Summary P5. Second, transmission constraints concentrate in a few corridors. A regional reliability plan's flow gate utilization, Table 2, shows recurring congestion that maps directly onto our preferred fiber routes. Third, summer peak pricing shows hour-by-hour volatility. The monthly electric power summaries average retail price by sector. Table 7 corroborates price spikes when we also expect traffic spikes. These are not headlines, they are deployment variables. Mechanism 2 is distribution and productization under energy reality. If a city offers fast permitting but unreliable feeders, we will still miss SLOs. The product must degrade gracefully when the grid sneezes. Pre-computed retrieval blocks, local tool paths for vision and forms, and a scheduler that knows when to push heavy jobs to cooler hours or cooler sites. Execution dominance means winning each iteration as constraints tighten, delivering steady latency and safety when the thermometer climbs and inspectors slow the border. Compute siting is a map of trade-offs. River adjacency reduces cooling cost but can raise flood risk and permitting scrutiny. Gas adjacency lowers electric price volatility but raises emissions accounting and pipeline outage risk. Co-siting near data gravity in border metros cuts network hops but pushes us into contested transmission lanes. There are options. There are 3 on whiteboards. 1 is off the table. Chase the lowest headline rate and ignore reliability. Fails on outages. The decision is between anchor sites on stable transmission with long-duration PPAs and back them with edge caches in border metros, and go heavy on multiple smaller sites near users with aggressive demand response. We choose the first for training and the second for tool-heavy inference. Together, they hedge weather and policy. Vignette 1 is an inspection and workflow platform for a binational aerospace supplier. The inference path is vision-heavy and bursts with shift changes. Our first deployment sat on attractive land with weak transmission redundancy. It failed on a transformer trip during a 42-degree heat afternoon. Our P95 jumped above 600 meters and the backlog took hours to unwind. We recovered by moving vision inference to an edge pod inside the plant, backed by a diesel-protected microgrid while keeping retrieval and policy checks in a regional core with a 10-year PPA and a verified emissions report. Latency stabilized under 250 mirrors. Unit cost rose slightly, but outage cost fell to near zero. Safety improved because the edge pod enforced offline guardrails with preloaded catalogs. Vignette 2 is a finance back-office co-pilot that reconciles invoices for Maquila operations. It is light on vision, heavy on retrieval, and structured tool calls. We placed this workload in a regional mesh across 2 states, relying on demand response bids to dodge peak prices. The SLOs held because the product gracefully shifted batch reconciliation to off-peak windows while keeping chat-like queries snappy with caches. The human-facing promise was honest. Instant answers for lookups, reconciliations complete by 7 a.m. Reliability was dignity for accountants who stopped staying late on hot days. Vignette 3 is an agent for port logistics that forecasts crossing ETAs and assigns drivers. The hard constraint was network freshness on wait times and road closures. Power wobble at our inference host broke freshness guarantees and trust. We solved it by co-siting a read-only mirror of the feeds inside the border metro with a low power failover and letting the agent degrade to a conservative mode when freshness fell below a threshold, telling dispatchers exactly why. The UI showed last update 2 minutes ago, conservative route applied. We kept credibility by refusing to hide uncertainty. Chinese capital and labor movements shift our infra and hiring choices. Industrial parks add load and shape transmission upgrades. The quarterly development bulletins, planned capacity additions. Table 4, forecast new draw on feeders we might share. We respond by engaging early on substation plans and pre-funding redundant feeders if the business case justifies it. Labor negotiations raise wage floors in targeted corridors. The labor surveys, wage index by region, Table B, pushes us to plan bilingual support teams with higher base pay and to invest in candid self-serve docs. The goal is not to squeeze costs at the expense of reliability. It is to match wages with uptime so the margin is earned by trust, not attrition. Human impact anchors decisions. A small clinic in Piedras Negras uses our triage assistant to route patients and print instructions in plain Spanish. If a brownout hits at 3 p.m., the assistant must still render safe advice from a local cache and clearly tell staff what it cannot do until link and power stabilize. We tested the clinic on a generator, we trimmed model size, and preloaded the top 500 answers with references to page 12 sections of official guidance. The nurse does not care about our emissions accounting. She cares that the printer works and the advice is sound. 2 recommendations for infrastructure and policy liaisons. Secure dual feed sites tied to independent substations, and structure PPAs with seasonal shape and firming that match our traffic profile. Horizon, shortlist in 30 days, LOIs in 90, PPAs in 150. For reliability and product leads, add an energy-aware scheduler to the platform that shifts heavy background tasks to cooler hours, surfaces user-facing freshness timers, and integrates a bilingual outage banner with rollback instructions. Horizon, prototype in 45 days, region-wide rollout in 120. A contrarian check, the cleanest renewables-only narrative can hide curtailment and intertie risk that quietly kill SLOs. Test it. Compare curtailment hours and nodal prices in the interconnection maps curtailment factors, Appendix C, against your expected traffic. If they don't line up, your green claim is a reliability liability. The fix is not abandoning clean power, it is pairing renewables with storage and firming that match our usage curve, then telling users the truth about what we guarantee. We keep receipts. Interconnection status is tracked per site with milestone dates and contingency plans. Transmission headroom is a numeric threshold. Below it, we stop adding racks. Cooling is budgeted in liters per hour and degrees delta, not in adjectives. Outage drills are real. We pull power on a pod during business hours and time recovery, then adjust playbooks. Governance extends to energy. Audit trails for PPAs. Emissions disclosures map to a sustainability report, Section 2, and third-party checks. No ceremonies, only artifacts. Bottom line, compute sits where power is certain, cooling is honest, transmission is clear, and people can keep it running. Mexico's leverage is the lever, not the constraint. Dense supply chains justify the mesh of cores and edges that keep agents fast and safe across the border. The pressure stays on because queues, heat, and inspections will not relax on our schedule. We designed the map and keep shipping. I close by synthesizing capability, safety, cost, and governance into 2 near-term moves and 1 long-term guardrail we can execute now. We are drawing threads together because the risk is not a single outage or a single policy change. It is drift of evals from usage, of costs from value, of governance from what real people need by the end of the day. I'll use a comparative lens between regulatory approaches because Mexico's leverage exposes how standards, audits, and industrial policy shape the build. The basic argument is that disciplined compliance, priced into unit economics from day one, is a competitive edge rather than a break. Here is why. Cross-border products operate under overlapping rules, and builders who can prove provenance, data handling, and safety outcomes with evidence will ship faster and be copied slower. Execution dominance here means winning each iteration as constraints tighten because we can show our work. Mechanism 1 is safety mitigations and governance made auditable, not policy decks, artifacts. Every sensitive answer is tied to a retrieved paragraph. Every tool call is bound to a role with rate limits. Every risky action is logged with a reviewer. We keep a trace that an external auditor can follow. Mechanism 2 is latency and unit economics surfaced in the same pane of glass as compliance. If a design choice adds 40 millers but removes an audit exception, we can see the trade, not guess it. A standards body's conformance checklist, Annex D, is a useful template. A national privacy rules article-by-article guidance, Section 12, gives us the language to map access and retention. A labor ministry's wage index by region, Table B, anchors what fair support staffing costs where we sell. These are checkable documents. They are not motivational posters. 3 vignettes show how this lands. First, a bilingual export document copilot for SME manufacturers. In the wild, users asked it to just fill everything. That is a failure mode. We moved to a constrained composer that assembles forms only from retrieved clauses, with every field linked to a paragraph citation. Latency rose by 20-30 miss due to extra retrieval, but correction rates fell, and audit acceptance climbed above 95% on a sampled set verified against Annex IDs. Trust increased because the system sometimes said, "I don't know," and pointed to the missing document. Second, an HR and scheduling agent for factories with cross-border shifts. The tricky part was handling wage differentials, overtime rules, and union clauses without stepping outside policy. We tied recommendations to a rules engine sourced from official texts and collective agreements, again with page references. Users could click through to the clause that drove a schedule suggestion. When a pay floor bumped, visible in Table B of a labor report, the agent updated the cost model and showed the delta. Unit cost of serving rose slightly, but churn fell because managers stopped fighting the tool. It argued with documents, not with them. Third, a field safety assistant for energy crews operating near pipelines and substations. This is where governance meets physics. The assistant never improvises lockout-tagout steps. It renders pre-approved checklists, localizes them, and requires a second worker to acknowledge on device. The provenance pane shows procedure ID and revision date, and the advice degrades to red if the device loses freshness. Last update 27 minutes ago, proceed with printed plan only. That line saved us once when a rule change hit mid-shift. We earned credibility by failing safe in public. Human impact remains the anchor. A customs broker in Nogales cares that the compliance assistant answers in clear Spanish and English, includes the right clause, and prints the form that gets stamped the first time. A line supervisor in Querétaro cares that the HR agent respects the new pay floor and doesn't ambush her with a surprise overtime pattern. A parent in McAllen cares that the logistics agent tells the truth about a 2-hour delay so pickup plans can change. Reliability is respect. Governance is the promise kept under pressure. There are options for how we close this build loop. One would be to centralize audits in a quarterly ceremony and treat compliance as a gate. It fails on reality. Drift happens weekly. Another would be to scatter responsibility across teams and assume dashboards substitute for accountability. It fails on focus. The decision is between continuous bilingual artifact-backed governance embedded in the product surface and after-the-fact correction with angry users. The former wins because it drives down incidents, speeds partner reviews, and stabilizes latency cost by avoiding retrofits. I anchor 3 final facts. A trade agency's Rules of Origin Guide, Chapter 4, defines traceability obligations in plain paragraphs. Those become our retrieval keys. A cloud regulator's incident reporting thresholds, Section 9, specifies time to report. We built pager routes and pre-filled templates mapped to those thresholds. A standards consortium's safety evaluation protocol, Table 3, lists red team scenarios. Our eval suite mirrors them in both languages, and we publish pass-fail deltas to an internal reliability board. Receipts first, then rhetoric. 2 near-term moves now. First, for infrastructure and finance, finalize a north-south power portfolio that pairs firm PPAs with modular battery storage near the border metros we serve, sized to ride through 2-hour summer peaks without throttling tool-heavy paths. Means LOAs this quarter, PPAs next quarter, batteries staged the quarter after. Measure percentage of peak requests served at target SLO without shedding. Second, for product and developer relations, launch a bilingual agent SDK with built-in retrieval scaffolds that force citations, paragraph, or annex labels. A policy engine that ships with starter rules mapped to Section 12 privacy obligations, and a lint that fails builds if unsafe tool rights are requested. Means private beta in 4 weeks, GA in 8, documentation in both languages with examples from a public conformance checklist. The long-term guardrail is a governance ledger that outlives any model Revenge. We will maintain a cryptographically signed, append-only trail that links major releases to their evals, safety mitigations, power sourcing, and data handling maps, with references to the exact public artifacts they claim to satisfy. We will open this ledger for external review on a cadence, and we will tie executive bonuses to clean audits and reliability deltas, not feature counts. It is not a press play. It is a survival play when ownership rotates and the memory of why we chose a constraint fades. A contrarian line to end. What slows us next may not be compute or power. It may be the absence of bilingual, citation-first UX patterns that let non-experts see why the system is right. Test it. Run a usability study where success is not clicks, but policy comprehension, and score it against Annex D checklists. If the user cannot explain the recommendation in their own words, our latency number is a vanity metric. The implication is we ship explanation as a feature, not as a help link. Synthesis is simple. Capability without grounding will drift. Safety without artifacts will fray. Cost without energy certainty will spike. Governance without bilingual clarity will stall adoption. Mexico's rising leverage is not a story about one country beating another. It is a story about proximity forcing us to build with tighter loops, clearer receipts, and power plans that work when the asphalt shimmers. Bottom line, the balance now permits agentic products that operate across the border with sub-250 menace, answers, document-cited claims, firmed power, and honest SLOs. It forbids improvisation near safety-critical flows, hand-wavy privacy promises, and green narratives that can't survive curtailment tables. It leaves uncertain how fast interconnection queues clear and how far labor reforms move wages. Thank you for caring about the unglamorous details. We keep shipping safely and keep listening.